The doors of the San Francisco County Courthouse slid open with a slow, heavy groan that felt louder than it should have. Morning fog still clung to the street outside, drifting in as Victoria stepped across the threshold. The cold air inside hit her first, then the sharp smell of polished marble and government paper. People moved around her in quiet clusters, lawyers whispering, a clerk tapping keys, a security officer waving someone through the scanner. Victoria stood still for one breath, then another. 7 months pregnant, she carried her weight carefully, one hand hovering near her stomach without even touching it. The other hand, that was the one that gave her away. It trembled, just once, a tiny shake, small enough that no one should have noticed, except she did. It was the kind of moment a camera would zoom in on, the kind of detail that told the truth she hadn't said aloud to anyone. Her chest tightened. She hadn't cried this morning, not when she put on her coat, not when she closed the car door, not even when she walked up the courthouse steps alone. But here, inside this cold building where lives were judged and split open, something inside her wavered. She caught her reflection in the long glass wall beside the security line. A proud black woman stared back at her, eyes strong, shoulders lifted, chin set like she had carried generations of women before her. Women who raised families through hardship, women who fought for fairness in schools and workplaces, women who survived California's economic storms and built community in the cracks. She had always stood tall in that line. But right now, she looked like someone whose heart had been stepped on. The thought hit her before she could pull back from it. How did loving him bring me to this place? Her throat burned. Her pulse thudded beneath her jaw. She pressed her palm gently against her belly, a slow, calming gesture. Inside, she whispered a promise no one else could hear. I won't let this world scare you before you get here. She blinked hard, steadying herself, because this wasn't just about her anymore. Every step she took today shaped the future of the child she carried. Before she could take another breath, a warm reminder moved through her mind, the kind she would offer another woman going through something painfully public. Y'all, if you're watching this, your likes and comments help stories like this reach more people who may need them. Thank you for supporting voices that deserve to be heard. She inhaled slowly, grounded again. Then, a voice behind her sliced through the quiet. He brought her to. It wasn't loud. It wasn't mocking, just a stunned whisper traveling across the lobby floor. Victoria didn't turn around. Her body locked in place, because she already knew who her meant. Her stomach tightened, not from fear for herself, but from knowing what this moment represented. Everyone has a day when someone they trusted chose another person, another priority, another life. Her day happened months ago, but today the consequences were waiting in courtroom chairs just a few feet above her. A mother passing by glanced at Victoria, then away. A couple waiting for their divorce hearing kept their conversation low, studying her from the corner of their eyes. None of them knew the truth of what she had endured. None knew how deeply Benjamin had cut her spirit. She swallowed hard and finally turned toward the elevator. A single ding echoed through the lobby. The doors slid open. Benjamin stepped out first, polished, composed, dressed like a man used to getting applause instead of judgment. His suit was sharp, his posture confident, as if this morning was nothing more than another business meeting on his schedule. He didn't see her yet. Or maybe he did, and pretended not to. But the woman behind him, Elizabeth, walked out with a slow, practiced elegance. She brushed her coat collar with her fingertips like she was preparing for photos, not a public legal battle. Her chin tipped up, lips barely curving, eyes scanning the room as though she expected admiration. A wave of murmurs rolled through the lobby. Victoria felt something shift inside her, not breaking again, but settling. A quiet strength forming in the space where her heartbreak had been. Because today wasn't about the humiliation she endured. Today wasn't about the moment she was forced to kneel. Today wasn't about Elizabeth's smirk or Benjamin's coldness. Today was about justice. As Benjamin finally locked eyes with her, the corner of his confidence faltered, just barely, but enough for her to see it. And the question rose sharply in the cold courthouse air, drawing everyone's breath with it. What punishment could make a billionaire tremble? Welcome to Mr. Stevens Stories, where powerful life lessons are shared through unforgettable storytelling. If you're new here, we're glad to have you. Subscribe and join us for more inspiring stories that motivate, uplift, and open the mind. And before we continue, drop a comment telling us the time and where you're watching this story from. The memory didn't arrive gently. It came the way certain memories do, uninvited, rising through nerves and heartbeat when you're standing in a place where your life is being measured. As Victoria stood in that courthouse lobby, the past pressed forward, unrolling itself in her mind with a clarity she hadn't asked for. She could almost smell the warm California evening again. Years earlier, she had stepped into a charity gala in downtown Los Angeles, one focused on expanding opportunities for women of color in tech. It was the kind of event that felt both glamorous and purposeful, a space where brilliant black women walked with their heads high and their ambitions higher. Los Angeles nights had a rhythm of their own, and that evening was no different. Soft jazz near the entrance, lively conversations near the bar, the faint hum of traffic outside the high-rise windows. Victoria remembered smoothing her dress as she entered, not out of insecurity, but out of habit. She carried the confidence of someone who had fought for her place in every room she entered. A young black professional in STEM, she already knew the numbers, how her earnings trailed behind men like Benjamin, how she had to outperform just to be seen. But she wasn't defined by lack. She was defined by effort, community, and the pride of a family that came from South LA roots. She had arrived early to help set up a sponsored booth showcasing innovative programs for girls in underserved neighborhoods. She believed in the work, she lived it. And that night, she intended to network, laugh with colleagues, maybe even enjoy a dance if the music got good later. She didn't expect him. Benjamin stood across the room near a display featuring startup success stories. The lighting softened around him, catching the clean lines of his suit. He looked slightly out of place, not uncomfortable, just observing, like a man more used to private meetings than community-focused events. She had seen his name before on donor lists, spoken during tech talks, occasionally in news headlines, but she had never seen him in person. She wasn't the type to approach someone just because of status. But he approached her. "Excuse me," he said, stopping a few feet from her booth. "Is this your display? I've seen your program featured in a few reports. Impressive work." Victoria lifted an eyebrow, not rudely, but with the natural suspicion of someone who had been praised too casually by men who hadn't done their homework. "You've read about it?" she asked. He smiled. It was polished, but not stiff. "I try to keep up with organizations worth supporting. Yours is one of them." The way he said it carried no hint of condescension. And that surprised her. She introduced herself, and he listened, really listened. His eyes didn't drift over the room, searching for a more important person to greet. He asked questions that were thoughtful, not performative. What made you want to teach, especially in tech? How did you get funding started? What challenges are you still facing? She answered each question honestly, adding a little humor where she felt comfortable. "Well, convincing teenagers to code is a whole challenge by itself," she joked. "You'd think asking them to climb Everest would get a better reaction." He laughed, genuinely. "I love that. So you don't just teach, you recruit warriors." She warmed at that, a small glow forming underneath her ribs. For the first time that evening, she wasn't thinking about statistics or compensation gaps or carrying the weight of her community on her shoulders. She was a woman being seen, fully seen, by someone who seemed interested in her brilliance, not just her demographic. He gestured toward a quieter corner near the windows. "You want to step over for a second? It's loud in here." Normally, she would have hesitated. But something about him felt intentional, present. "Sure," she said softly. They walked toward the glass overlooking downtown Los Angeles. The skyline sparkled, and voices from the gala faded enough for them to speak comfortably. "I admire what your program does," Benjamin said. "I grew up around people who had every advantage and still wasted it. You're building something that actually changes lives." Victoria tilted her head. "You talk like someone who made it on their own." He chuckled under his breath. "I wouldn't say that. I had opportunities, mentors, a safety net. But I worked hard too, maybe too hard." She caught it, a flicker in his tone, a hint of a man who pushed himself because standing still felt unsafe, a man who measured worth by output. At the time, she mistook that for drive. She admired it. They talked for nearly an hour about everything from family histories to startup culture to the strange loneliness that sometimes came with being ambitious. When the music switched to something slow and warm, he glanced toward the open floor where a few couples had started dancing. "Do you want to?" he asked. If not, totally fine. Victoria wasn't a woman who danced easily with strangers, but she felt something sincere in his request. Something human, so she said yes. His hand rested lightly on her waist, respectful. Her hand settled on his shoulder. They moved slowly, almost shyly, but something clicked, effortlessly. It was the kind of moment that made possibilities feel endless. It was the night she first felt that maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who understood her fire and wanted to protect it. If only she had known how different the ending would be. The memory shifted again, carrying Victoria to a time when love still felt like something she could hold with both hands. Back then, everything between her and Benjamin glowed with possibility. They were newly married, still learning each other's rhythms, still believing effort alone could make two different worlds blend without friction. She remembered mornings in their Los Angeles home when sunlight slipped between the blinds and landed across the kitchen counter. Benjamin would sit on a bar stool, scrolling through emails while pretending he wasn't already thinking about work. She would brew her coffee, humming softly as she prepared for her students, and he'd look up long enough to say something sweet. "Come here," he'd murmur with a lazy grin, pulling her into a hug that smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. She'd laugh because he always acted like he'd been waiting hours just to see her, even though she had been standing there the whole time. When they found out she was pregnant, everything changed in the most beautiful way. She had seen the faint pink lines before he did. Her hand shook as she held the test, but this time the trembling was happy. When she stepped out of the bathroom with tears in her eyes, he understood before she even said a word. He lifted her off the ground and spun her in a slow circle, laughing into her neck with a joy she hadn't heard from him in months. "Vic, you're going to be a mother," he whispered, voice cracking in a way that surprised them both. She touched his cheek. "And you're going to be a father." For weeks they moved like people carrying a soft secret between them. She hid her early nausea behind peppermint candy. He went overboard researching baby gear, strollers that practically drove themselves, monitors that could track every breath, apps that promised to optimize parenting. She teased him for it. But the truth was, it warmed her. He was excited. He was present. He was theirs. Her family hosted the baby shower in South LA, food warming in foil pans, cousins greeting each other with laughter, her aunt shouting over the music to pass her a plate. A small choir from their family church stopped by to sing one of Victoria's grandmother's favorite hymns, the one she always played during holidays. Benjamin arrived wearing a bright smile and carrying a stack of expensive gifts. He greeted her family with respect, even helping her uncle move the grill when the heat got too high. He wasn't from her world, but for that afternoon he blended in effortlessly. Her best friend pulled her aside while everyone ate. "Girl, you look happy," she said, nudging her shoulder. "I am," Victoria replied, placing a hand on her growing belly. "For the first time in a long time, everything feels right." Her friend raised an eyebrow. "Not everything. White men in tech come with layers." Victoria bumped her playfully. "Stop. I'm serious. Communicating with him ain't the same as communicating with us. Y'all gonna have to meet each other halfway sometimes. Don't lose yourself." "I won't," Victoria promised. Looking back, that moment carried more weight than she realized. Benjamin had his own set of expectations, different communication habits, a more analytical way of processing emotions. He didn't always understand the subtle glances or the shared humor in her family's conversations, but at that time they adapted to each other with sincerity, laughing through the awkward bits, building a life at the pace of two people who believed love could outgrow their differences. They announced the baby's gender at a small gathering. Benjamin popped the confetti cannons prematurely, showering himself in pink and gold. Everyone laughed, and even he couldn't stop smiling as he wiped glitter from his hair. "This is going to be the smartest kid in California," he said proudly. "Only if she gets my brains," Victoria teased. "Oh, definitely yours," he admitted, kissing her forehead. Those were the days she cherished most, the days when their love felt balanced, when she felt seen and heard, when she believed they were walking into parenthood side by side. But even then, beneath the sweetness, something faint existed. A small uneasiness, a quiet shift in Benjamin's focus that she couldn't quite name. It started with one late meeting, then a missed dinner, then entire weekends spent working on a new project he claimed was urgent. He still came home with expensive gifts, designer clothes for the baby, high-tech alerts for her prenatal care, a massage chair he insisted would ease her back pain. But he came home later too, exhausted, distracted, less present in conversations, less engaged in her daily joys. One night, as she prepared lesson plans at the kitchen table, he walked past her without kissing her forehead, something he never forgot before. She called his name softly. "Ben." He paused. "Yeah? Sorry, just thinking about tomorrow's meeting." She nodded, forcing a smile. "Okay. Don't work too late." He leaned down briefly and kissed the top of her head, but she felt the distance in the gesture. It was gentle, but not the way it used to be. After he went upstairs, she rested a hand over her stomach. "Baby," she whispered quietly, "your daddy's tired, that's all. We just need to be patient." But a part of her felt the shift, a subtle fracture, a change in the rhythm of their home. She didn't know it yet, but she was standing at the edge of the first crack in their foundation, the beginning of a silence that would grow until it became something she could no longer ignore. The further Victoria moved into her pregnancy, the more her world shifted into a rhythm she couldn't control. At first, the changes were small, barely there, easy to ignore. Benjamin missed a lunch they planned, then a check-in call, then an appointment. He always apologized, always wrapped the moment in some explanation about investors or deadlines or meetings he couldn't move. But the gaps kept widening. By the time she reached her third trimester, those gaps felt like a wall he didn't realize he'd built between them. On a Wednesday morning, she sat alone in the waiting room of her prenatal clinic in Culver City, tapping her fingers lightly against her thigh. The walls carried soft colors meant to be soothing, but the quiet only reminded her he wasn't beside her. The nurse came out with a clipboard. "Victoria Thompson?" She stood slowly, adjusting the hem of her maternity blouse. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle reminder she wasn't alone, just lonely. Inside the exam room, the doctor greeted her warmly. "How are you feeling? Any new symptoms?" "Tired," she admitted. "Some back pain. And a little stressed." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "That's normal, but remember, Black mothers in California face higher risks. We monitor everything closely for that reason. Have you noticed swelling, headaches, changes in vision?" Victoria shook her head. "Nothing like that." "Good. And Benjamin? Is he able to attend the next appointment?" Victoria hesitated before answering. "He's trying." It felt strange saying it out loud. The doctor didn't judge her. She simply made a note and continued explaining new nutritional guidelines and stress precautions. When the appointment ended, Victoria walked out with her ultrasound photos tucked in her purse. She wished she could hand them to Benjamin the way she imagined months ago, him smiling, pulling her into his arms, talking about names and futures. But lately, their conversations mostly revolved around work. That night, she reheated leftover chicken while Benjamin paced the living room with his phone pressed to his ear. She watched him from the kitchen doorway. He moved quickly, voice tense as he discussed projected numbers and investor temperament. She didn't interrupt. When he finally hung up, she spoke quietly. "How was your day?" He rubbed his eyes. "Long. I'm exhausted. I went to the appointment today." He froze for a moment. "Too long." "Oh, right. I'm sorry. I should have been there." She wanted to tell him how the doctor's words stayed with her, how real the risks felt, how much it meant to have support in those seconds when fear swelled unexpectedly, but she didn't want to burden him. He already sounded worn, stretched, distracted. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'll show you the pictures if you want." He smiled, but it was a weak one. Of course. Still, he didn't come closer. Instead, he went upstairs to take another call. That night, as she lay in bed, she felt the exhaustion of balancing two versions of herself, one who communicated warmly with her family, letting her natural tone slip free, and one who spoke carefully with Benjamin, always choosing professionalism without realizing she was doing it. Code switching had become second nature around him. She hadn't expected it to feel so heavy. The next morning, she attended a parent meeting at her school. A colleague noticed the shadows under her eyes. "You need rest," they said gently. "I'm trying," she replied, but she knew the truth. She wasn't tired from pregnancy alone. She was tired from carrying a marriage on her own shoulders. That night, she cooked dinner for both of them, hoping to reconnect. When Benjamin walked in, she brightened. "I made your favorite, lemon pepper chicken." He gave a distracted smile. "That's sweet. I'll grab a plate in a minute. I have to answer an email." She paused, the serving spoon hovering over the dish. Her heart sank, not dramatically, not in a movie kind of way, just quietly, a slow ache spreading through her chest. When he finally came to the table, she had already finished eating. "I'm sorry, Vic," he murmured, sitting down. "This project is bigger than we expected." She nodded. He didn't notice the hurt. Or maybe he did, and didn't know what to do with it. After dinner, she walked to the balcony alone. The night breeze touched her cheeks as she looked over the city lights. She placed both hands on her belly. "Baby," she whispered, "I hope you never feel invisible in your own home. I hope someone always makes room for you." Her voice wavered, but she steadied herself. Turning back inside, she offered a gentle message to her viewers. "If you were in my shoes, watching the person you love drift away little by little, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. Your voice matters here." She walked back in, closed the balcony door, and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, she would try again. But a quiet truth had settled in her heart. Something was slipping, and she was the only one noticing it. The night the first real suspicion took root wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, almost too quietly, on a Thursday evening when the house felt emptier than it used to. Benjamin had come home late again. Victoria sat on the couch with her prenatal pillow supporting her back, her laptop open but untouched. She had meant to finish writing an email to a student's parent. Instead, she kept glancing at the clock, waiting for the sound of his car in the driveway. When he finally walked through the door, he didn't greet her with his usual, "Hey, I missed you." He didn't kiss her forehead or ask about her day. He didn't even take off his coat right away. He headed straight for the stairs, voice clipped as he said, "I just need 1 minute, Vic. 1 minute." She didn't argue. She simply watched him go. Upstairs, a faint glow spilled from his office, the door only halfway shut. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop when she walked past to the bathroom. She only paused because she heard something she hadn't heard from him in months. He was laughing. Not the tired, polite chuckle he had started giving her lately. Not the strained laugh he used in meetings. A full, warm, relaxed laugh. The kind of laugh he used to share with her. She froze in the hallway, one hand braced against the wall as the baby nudged her ribs. "No, seriously," he said on the phone, voice light. A pause. More laughter. "That's actually funny. You're terrible." Victoria's breath caught. It had been so long since she'd heard that tone, carefree, unguarded, that it felt like listening to a stranger wearing her husband's voice. She stepped forward, not close enough to see him, but close enough to hear the shift in his tone. He lowered his voice suddenly. "No, she's downstairs. I can't talk long." Her heart tightened. He had never said anything like that before. She waited, still as glass. Then, "I'll call you later," he murmured, softer than before. A softness meant for someone else. When he hung up, she moved quickly into the bathroom, closing the door quietly so he wouldn't know she'd been nearby. Inside, she gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles whitened. It wasn't that she thought he was cheating instantly. Suspicion doesn't strike like lightning. It starts as a faint shadow across the heart, something you feel before you admit it out loud. She stared at her reflection. Her face was tired, beautiful still, but weary in a way she hadn't been before pregnancy. Her eyes looked older tonight, weighed down by the slow accumulation of things unsaid. She whispered to herself, "You're overthinking. He's stressed, that's all." But her voice didn't sound convinced. She left the bathroom and walked downstairs, needing a moment to breathe in a space where his voice wouldn't echo in her mind. In the living room, she lit a candle on the table, a Juneteenth candle she used only for moments when she needed grounding. Her grandmother had given her the first one years ago, saying, "Baby, when your spirit feels heavy, light this. Not to fix things, just to remember where you come from." She inhaled the soft scent as the flame steadied. In that flame, she saw memories of her grandmother braiding her hair on summer mornings, reminding her that black women carried the world's weight with grace because they came from people who survived what should have broken them. Tonight, Victoria didn't want to carry anything alone. Not uncertainty, not loneliness, not fear. She sat there quietly, breathing through the ache. A few minutes later, Benjamin came downstairs. He wore the polite smile he'd started using like a default setting. "Hey," he said casually. "Hey," she replied, keeping her tone steady. "Who were you talking to?" He shrugged lightly. "Just a colleague. A colleague." At almost 10 at night, making him laugh the way she hadn't heard in weeks. She didn't push. Something in her heart whispered that pushing wouldn't bring the truth closer. It would only make him retreat more. "I warmed dinner for you," she said. "Oh, thanks. I'll grab it in a minute." She nodded and watched him move toward the kitchen. When he wasn't looking, she placed a hand over her belly again. "Baby," she whispered, "if something is changing, I promise I'll protect you from whatever hurt comes with it." Her voice didn't tremble, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she couldn't afford to break. Not now. Not while she was carrying the one innocent part of their marriage that still felt pure. She blew out the candle slowly, watching the smoke curl upward like a quiet prayer. The seed of suspicion had taken root, and deep down, she already feared what it would grow into. Victoria felt it in her chest before she ever saw anything with her own eyes. That quiet suspicion from the week before had been growing, threading itself through her thoughts no matter how hard she tried to push it aside. She wasn't a woman who snooped or hunted for secrets, but something inside her, instinct, intuition, maybe even self-preservation, kept nudging her. And tonight, that instinct guided her like a hand on her shoulder. It was late, later than usual. Rain tapped against the windows as she sat on the couch, one hand rubbing her stomach in slow circles. Benjamin had texted 30 minutes earlier, running late, finishing something. Be home soon. She stared at the words until they blurred. Soon had become one of those flexible words, bendable, stretched thin, empty if she stared at it too long. She pushed herself off the couch and walked toward the kitchen for water. When she passed the hallway mirror, her reflection caught her off guard. She looked strong, yes, but she also looked like a woman carrying too much. She whispered, "You're okay. You're okay," and placed a hand on her belly again, grounding herself. Outside, headlights swept across the living room wall. A car door shut. Her heart lifted for a second. Then she heard something else. A voice, a familiar one, Benjamin's, and another voice, soft, female, laughing lightly. Victoria froze. The laughter wasn't loud, but it carried the same smooth confidence she remembered hearing from the hallway the night of that phone call. Her breath caught. She stepped toward the front windows slowly, quietly. She didn't want to be the woman peering out like she lived in fear. But something told her she needed to know. When she looked through the sheer curtain, she saw Benjamin standing beside his car, and next to him, Elizabeth. Her chest tightened so sharply she grabbed the windowsill. Elizabeth was leaning toward him, adjusting her coat the same way she had in the courthouse lobby months later. Her face was relaxed, almost casual. Too casual. Benjamin wasn't touching her, but he wasn't stepping back either. He wasn't acting like a man who knew he was being watched. He was acting like a man comfortable with being seen with someone he shouldn't be standing that close to. Victoria backed up from the window. The room felt colder, quieter, too still. She walked toward the front door, her hands trembling, not weakly, but with a controlled fury rising beneath her skin. She didn't fling the door open. She didn't scream. She opened it with the calm of someone who had carried disappointment long enough to stop fearing it. Both of them turned. Benjamin's face stiffened. Elizabeth straightened her coat, eyes wide for a flash before she schooled them into a neutral expression. Victoria stepped out onto the porch. The rain had slowed, but the air still held the weight of it. "What's going on?" she asked. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. It landed steady. Benjamin cleared his throat. "Vic, she just needed a ride. She had a meeting near my office. That's all." Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. His tie was loosened. His hair was slightly mussed. He wasn't flustered enough for this to be innocent. Elizabeth spoke before he could continue. "We were discussing something from the conference last month. I didn't mean to interrupt your evening." Victoria held her gaze. Elizabeth didn't look ashamed. Not truly. But she also didn't look confident. She looked like a woman who had rehearsed just enough excuses to feel safe using them. Victoria inhaled slowly. "Discussing something," she repeated. "At this hour." Benjamin bristled at her tone. "Vic, don't do this. You're tired. You're emotional. You're pregnant." Her eyes sharpened. "Don't blame the baby for what you're doing." A flicker of guilt crossed his face. There, then gone. Elizabeth stepped back slightly, sensing the heat rising in the air. Victoria looked at her husband again. "Are you seeing her?" she asked. Clean, direct, no room to hide. Benjamin opened his mouth, closed it, then gave her the answer without giving her the words. His silence stretched out too long, too heavy. It was enough. Something inside Victoria broke, but not the way she expected. It didn't shatter. It hardened. She lifted her chin. "So this is why you've been laughing at someone else's jokes, why you've been missing appointments, why you suddenly have meetings that last until midnight." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "Victoria, stop. You're making this bigger than..." "Than what?" she cut in. Than me carrying our child while you're out building a second life? Elizabeth flinched. Victoria continued, voice steady but sharp with truth. You walked away from your family before it was even fully formed, and you didn't even have the courage to tell me yourself. Benjamin exhaled harshly. She'll be fine, he muttered under his breath. Victoria froze. He wasn't talking about Elizabeth. He was talking about her. About Victoria. About the woman carrying his child. The words sliced through her. She straightened her shoulders, not out of pride, but out of necessity. I'll be fine, she said quietly. But not with you. She turned, walked back inside, and closed the door with a calm that surprised even her. Behind the door, she leaned against the wood for one long breath. Her dignity trembled, just like her hands did the day she entered the courthouse, but it did not fall. Her heart cracked, but it did not collapse. As the baby shifted inside her, she whispered, We're leaving. We're not staying where we aren't valued. The house felt too quiet after Victoria closed the door on Benjamin and Elizabeth the night before. She barely slept. She lay awake listening to the baby shift inside her, counting each breath, reminding herself she wasn't alone even as her heart twisted with betrayal. By morning she knew she had to confront him. She needed answers, not excuses, not half-truths, not the version of him that hid behind business jargon and late-night phone calls. When Benjamin returned home, it was already past noon. He entered the house with the tense energy of someone preparing for a fight, not reconciliation. He dropped his keys on the counter and exhaled sharply. We need to talk, Victoria said, standing in the living room. He didn't nod. He didn't step closer. He simply stared, cold and tired. Vic, last night got blown out of proportion, he began. You shouldn't have come outside like that. Her jaw tightened. I came outside because my husband brought another woman home. He flinched but tried to mask it with arrogance. You're pregnant, emotional, overwhelmed. Stop using the baby as a shield, she cut in. Her voice didn't shake. You were caught standing with her, like what? He snapped. Like someone I confide in, someone who actually understands the pressure I'm under. Her breath caught. So he was admitting it. Not the affair outright, but the emotional betrayal behind it. Victoria stepped back, needing space to breathe. He moved forward then, not in apology, but annoyance. I'm tired of being treated like the villain. You've been distant for months. She stared at him, stunned. You pulled away from me, Benjamin, not the other way around. He shook his head dismissively. You don't get what my life requires. I'm carrying your child. That made him pause, but only for a moment. Something hardened behind his eyes, something cold, something she'd never seen from him so clearly. Vic, he said, voice quieter but sharper, if you want this marriage to work, you need to show respect. She blinked. Respect? Yes. He gestured vaguely, as if her pain were an inconvenience. Last night was humiliating. You embarrassed me in front of someone I work closely with. Her heart dropped. Embarrassed you? Yes. His tone rose. Elizabeth was uncomfortable. You put her in a terrible position. Her stomach tightened around his words, a physical ache, because he wasn't just choosing another woman. He was protecting her. Benjamin, she whispered. What happened to you? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, jaw set, pride swelling in all the wrong ways. If you want to prove you're committed to fixing this, then you need to apologize to her. Victoria stared at him, breath frozen in her chest. Apologize? She repeated slowly. For confronting my husband with the truth. His expression stayed stone still. It's the only way we move forward, he insisted. Show Elizabeth you respect boundaries. Boundaries. He said the word as if she had crossed lines, as if Elizabeth was the one who needed protecting. Victoria's pulse hammered beneath her skin. And what exactly do you want me to do? She asked. His next words landed like ice. Kneel. Silence slammed into the room. Victoria's chest tightened so sharply she had to brace her hand on the table to steady herself. You want me to kneel, she said quietly, in front of the woman you're cheating on me with. He didn't deny it. Not with words. Not with body language. He simply repeated, if you care about this family, you will kneel and apologize. Her throat burned. Her hands trembled. But her voice stayed steady. Too steady. Where is she? She's in the car, he answered, crossing his arms. I told her I'd handle this. Handle. As if she were a burden to be managed. Victoria walked past him slowly, every step deliberate. When she reached the driveway, Elizabeth stepped out of the car, arms folded, chin slightly lifted, as if waiting for a show. Victoria stood before them both. Benjamin's posture was rigid, his expectations clear. Elizabeth's eyes glimmered with a smug discomfort, feigning innocence but bathing in the power imbalance. Victoria moved forward and lowered herself to her knees. The baby kicked inside her, as if objecting to the humiliation wrapped around them. Tears gathered in her eyes but did not fall. She refused to give either of them the satisfaction. Elizabeth shifted uncomfortably now, realizing the gravity of what was happening. "This isn't necessary," Elizabeth murmured, not in kindness, but in fear of how it looked. But Benjamin's face hardened. "Do it, Vic." Victoria lifted her chin, still kneeling, and whispered, "I'm not kneeling for you. I'm kneeling because I need to see my own strength." Her words hung in the air. Then she rose slowly, one breath, one push through the pain, holding her dignity in her hands like something fragile but unbreakable. She walked back into the house without another word. Behind her, Benjamin called out, annoyed. Elizabeth stayed silent. Victoria closed the door, leaned against it, and finally, a single tear fell, not from weakness, but from the moment she realized the marriage she tried to save had already ended. The house felt hollow when Victoria walked back inside, like the walls had pulled away from her, refusing to hold her together the way they once did. She closed the front door gently, but the sound echoed through the rooms with a dull ache, as if the house itself understood what she had endured. She did not collapse. She did not scream. She stood completely still, letting the quiet settle over her until she could hear her own heartbeat again. Her knees throbbed from where she'd been forced down. Her chest felt tight. Her hands trembled, not out of fear, but from the weight of humiliation that pressed against her ribs like something heavy and shifting. She moved slowly toward the living room, gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. When she sank onto the couch, her breath hitched, and for the first time all day, her resolve slipped. A single sob escaped. Just one, soft, raw, honest. She covered her mouth instantly, as if she could silence the hurt by trapping it in her palm. But more tears followed, quiet at first, then harder, falling down her cheeks and dripping onto her hands. She cried for the woman she used to be. She cried for the love she thought she had. She cried for the betrayal, etched into her memory like a bruise she couldn't reach to soothe. But most of all, she cried for her child, an innocent life carried through a storm she never imagined facing. She leaned forward, hands clasped over her face, and let herself break. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in that deep, private way only women who have been pushed past their limits can understand. Minutes passed, maybe hours. She wasn't sure. The world outside the window darkened, shadows stretching across the floor as evening settled in. When her tears finally slowed, she wiped her face with trembling fingers and rested both hands on her belly. The baby moved gently beneath her touch, as if responding to her pain. She whispered, voice hoarse, "Sweetheart, Mommy is so sorry you felt that." She pressed her forehead lightly against her stomach, eyes closing as a warmth rose inside her, a warmth she didn't expect. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't hope. It was resolve. "I will never kneel like that again," she whispered. "Not for any man. Not for anyone who tries to break me." Her voice steadied as she continued, speaking to her unborn child as if she were teaching a lesson they would one day need. "You will never see me let someone treat me like I don't matter. You will know what strength is. You will know what love should look like. You will grow up knowing your mother chose dignity." The baby nudged her again, a small, fluttering reassurance. Slowly, Victoria stood. Her legs felt weak, but her mind felt clearer than it had in months. She walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and held the cool glass against her cheek for a moment. Through the window, she could see Benjamin and Elizabeth still talking on the driveway. The sight made her stomach twist, but instead of breaking her further, it hardened something inside her. She walked away from the window. She didn't need to see any more. She went to the bedroom, opened her closet, and pulled out a small stack of documents she kept organized in a folder. She flipped through them carefully. Even the sound of the papers felt like a shift in the air. Medical forms, prenatal records, financial documents, marriage license. She placed them on the bed, one by one, in a neat line. Then she walked into the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and stared at her reflection. She didn't see weakness. She didn't see humiliation. She saw a woman who had reached her breaking point and refused to stay broken. She took a deep breath, then another. Then she whispered to the mirror, "This ends tomorrow." The decision settled over her like a quiet cloak, firm, steady, unshakable. She would not stay with a man who humiliated her. She would not raise her child in a home where betrayal was normal. She would not lose herself to a marriage that had already crumbled. When she returned to the bed, she gently placed her hand over the folder and closed it. In the morning, she would file for divorce. But tonight she needed to reclaim the parts of herself that he tried to strip away. She changed into soft pajamas and wrapped herself in a blanket on the couch. She didn't want to sleep beside Benjamin, not now, not again. The couch wasn't comfortable, but it felt safe. It felt like hers. As the night deepened, she spoke again to the child inside her, soft, steady, nurturing. "I promise you," she whispered, "you will grow up knowing that your mother chose strength over surrender." Her eyes closed slowly, exhaustion finally tugging her under. Her breathing steadied, though her heart ached. The baby shifted once more, reminding her of the life she was protecting. And there, under the quiet glow of the lamp, wrapped in solitude and strength, Victoria made her choice. Tomorrow, she would begin the fight for her future. Tomorrow, she would take the first step toward freedom. Morning light crept across the living room floor slowly, brushing over Victoria's face as she lay curled beneath a blanket. Her eyes opened not because she felt rested, but because something inside her had shifted during the night, something sharp, something steady. She sat up slowly, hand resting on her belly. "Today," she whispered. "We start today." She folded the blanket neatly, stood with quiet determination, and walked upstairs to dress. She didn't choose anything elaborate, just a clean dress that made her feel grounded, present, dignified. When she passed the mirror, her reflection met her with a fierce calm. The woman looking back at her wasn't broken. She was exhausted, yes, wounded deeply, but she stood anyway. She walked downstairs with the folder of documents tucked against her chest and headed toward the front door. But when she stepped outside, Benjamin was there. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, arms crossed, face tight with frustration, not remorse, not confusion. Control. "Where are you going?" he demanded. She didn't flinch. "Out." "With what?" "That folder you're holding?" His voice sharpened. "What's in it?" Her silence was answer enough. His jaw tightened. "You're being ridiculous, Vic." She walked past him. He followed. "You're really going to hold last night over my head, after everything I've done for this family?" She stopped and turned, slow and steady. "Family?" Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade honed by truth. "You built a family with me and then handed parts of yourself to another woman." He opened his mouth, but she kept talking. "You want to talk about being ridiculous? Making your pregnant wife kneel in front of your mistress is ridiculous. It's cruel, and you know it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was preparing to negotiate. "Not apologize. Vic, listen, if you file anything dramatic, the company will hear about it. Investors will panic. My team will see it as instability. We need to handle this carefully." She blinked in disbelief. "You're worried about investors? I'm worried about everything we built. There is no we anymore," she said. The words landed harder than she expected. Benjamin's expression shifted, not into pain, but into offense. "So, that's it?" he asked. "You're done?" "Yes." He stared at her with something dark in his eyes, something that cared less about love and more about control slipping through his fingers. "You really think this will go your way?" he said quietly. "You really think judges favor women who act emotional?" Her chest tightened. So this was how he planned to fight. He stepped even closer. "I have lawyers already preparing statements. If you file, they will argue you're unstable, overwhelmed, not thinking clearly because of the pregnancy." Victoria held her folder tightly. The wind caught her dress, but she stood still, unmoved. "That's the angle you're choosing?" she asked. "It's smart. Vic's strategic." He shrugged like he was discussing a contract, not their marriage. "You've been crying a lot. Your doctor has documented stress. The court will see that." He said it casually, like he wasn't weaponizing her vulnerability, her honesty, her humanity. "How could you use that against me?" she whispered. "Because you're forcing my hand," he snapped. "If you go public with this, everything I built is at risk." She stepped back, one hand instinctively covering her stomach. "You're not protecting your company," she said slowly. You're protecting your ego. He flinched, barely, but she caught it. And if you push me, he continued, I'll have no choice but to bring up your emotional episodes, the dizziness, the crying, the pregnancy stress. I'll argue you're not fit to make rational decisions right now. Her heart thundered. The insult didn't just cut her, it ignited her. You would put the mother of your child through that? She asked softly. Benjamin's silence answered for him. Something inside her locked into place then, something cold and precise. Without another word, she turned and walked to her car. She heard him exhale sharply behind her, maybe angry, maybe panicked, but she didn't look back. She drove to the courthouse with her hands gripping the steering wheel. Every breath she took carried fear and strength in equal measure. When she walked into the filing office, the clerk gave her a gentle, understanding look. Do you need help preparing anything, ma'am? The clerk asked. Victoria swallowed. Yes, she said. I'm filing for divorce. Her voice didn't tremble. The clerk nodded and handed her paperwork. As she sat at the small desk provided, she filled each line carefully. She listed her name, Benjamin's name. Reason, irreconcilable differences. California was a no-fault divorce state. She didn't need to prove adultery. She didn't need to relive what he did. She only needed to choose herself. But Benjamin didn't know that, or didn't care. He planned to spin a narrative where she was fragile, unstable, irrational. As she completed the forms, a knot formed low in her stomach. Not fear, anticipation. This would not be an easy battle. When she finished, she handed the documents to the clerk. The clerk stamped them. Official, unchangeable. Next step, the clerk said gently, is preparing for court proceedings. It may take time, but you're on the right path. Victoria nodded. Thank you. Walking out of the courthouse into the California sun, she pressed a hand over her belly again. We're going to be okay, she whispered. No matter how hard he fights, we're going to be okay. But even as she spoke the words, she felt fear coil beneath her ribs. Benjamin was rich, powerful, well-connected, and now, cornered. She knew men like him didn't retreat. They retaliated. As she drove home, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and steel. The war had begun, and she would have to face it carrying the life she'd sworn to protect. The courthouse steps felt heavier beneath Victoria's feet than they had months ago. Back then, she walked into this building with fear knotted in her chest. Today, she walked with a strange blend of courage and trembling, strength filling one side of her heart, exhaustion weighing down the other. The morning air buzzed with quiet conversation. Press cameras lined the sidewalk like metal vultures waiting to feed on scandal. Everywhere she looked, people whispered behind raised hands. She took a breath, touched her stomach gently, her protector's gesture, and continued forward. Inside the lobby, the courtroom hallway was already packed. Reporters, community members, curious strangers, and even a few women from local advocacy groups had gathered after hearing about her case. They weren't there for gossip. They were there because her story echoed something familiar. Silenced women, ignored wives, mothers fighting for dignity. The crowd parted slightly when they saw her. Some nodded respectfully. Some murmured her name softly, as if offering quiet encouragement. But there were other whispers too. Harsh ones, judgmental ones, unkind ones. She's the one who knelt, right? Why would she stay with a man like that? Public humiliation? Couldn't be me. Victoria kept walking, jaw tight but posture steady. She didn't know strangers' explanations. When she reached the courtroom doors, she heard the murmurs shift, softening into tension. Benjamin had arrived. He stood at the far end of the hall surrounded by his legal team. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his hair immaculate, his expression cold and unbothered. He looked like a man walking into a business negotiation, not a divorce proceeding where he had shattered the trust of the woman he claimed to love. Elizabeth stood beside him, arms folded, wearing a guarded look, but not regret. Cameras snapped rapidly when she adjusted her jacket. One reporter whispered, "Is she really here, even today?" Another replied, "They say the kneeling incident is the key point. Judge won't like it." Victoria's stomach twisted. Benjamin's eyes finally met hers across the hallway. For a moment, something flickered, a small crack in his carefully crafted confidence. Then he lifted his chin slightly, as if reminding himself that he still had power. She turned away first, not in defeat, in refusal to be pulled into a silent war of stares. Inside the gallery, tension thickened immediately. The courtroom felt packed beyond capacity, the wooden pews filled with people from different walks of life. Some were from Victoria's community in South LA. Some were tech employees who knew Benjamin's name. Some were random residents who simply wanted to witness what they called one of the most emotional cases of the year. Two women whispered near the back. "She represents a lot of us. And him? Money won't save him from this." But others muttered, "Billionaires always win. He'll spin it." Cultural tensions simmered in the space like two parallel storms, one rooted in community solidarity for Victoria, one rooted in economic power and public perception of Benjamin. Victoria walked down the aisle slowly, each step steady, each breath measured. Her attorney motioned for her to sit, but before she did, she looked around the gallery. Some people met her eyes with warmth, others with curiosity, one or two with skepticism, but not a single person didn't know who she was. Not today. She sat, resting one hand over her stomach again. The baby shifted gently, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Across the aisle, Benjamin whispered something to his lawyer. His confidence radiated off him, but there was an undercurrent, something uneasy, beneath the surface. Reporters scribbled notes. Camera shutters clicked. The courtroom air felt charged. Victoria inhaled deeply and offered a soft message to her viewers watching the story unfold. "Family, if you were sitting in this courtroom today, would you say Benjamin deserves mercy or consequences? Let me know in the comments. Your voice truly matters here." She exhaled slowly. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Because in just a few moments, the judge would enter, and everything that had broken her life open, the kneeling, the affair, the betrayal, the humiliation, would finally be laid bare before the law. The door behind the bench opened. A clerk announced the judge's arrival. Everyone stood. Victoria lifted her chin, spine straightening with a strength she didn't know she still had. She wasn't here as a victim. She was here as a mother, as a woman choosing herself, as someone who refused to be silent any longer. The judge took their seat. The room fell into a hushed stillness. The earthquake was about to begin. The judge's gavel struck once, firm, deliberate, echoing through the packed courtroom. "Please be seated." Everyone lowered themselves slowly into their seats, though the tension in the room refused to settle. Victoria adjusted in her chair, breathing carefully as she felt her baby shift beneath her hand. Every movement felt like a reminder of what she was fighting for. Benjamin sat across the aisle, straight-backed, his expression confident, carefully arranged for public viewing. His lawyers shuffled papers, whispering strategies. Elizabeth sat behind him, attempting to look composed, though her crossed arms and stiff posture revealed more than she meant to. The judge glanced at both tables. "We are here today to hear arguments regarding the divorce proceedings initiated by Mrs. Victoria Thompson." Her last name still hurt, but hearing it spoken in this courtroom felt like the first step toward reclaiming her life. "Counsel," the judge continued, "you may begin." Benjamin's attorney stood first, an older man with a smooth voice and the kind of practiced confidence that came from years of defending wealthy clients. "Your Honor," he said, stepping forward, "my client wishes to make it clear that while there have been misunderstandings and emotional moments, he remains committed to resolving this matter fairly." Victoria felt her jaw tighten. Committed? Benjamin hadn't even offered her a genuine apology. The attorney continued, "Mrs. Thompson has been under significant emotional pressure due to her pregnancy. We will present evidence that her recent actions, rash decisions, heightened responses, reflect a temporary instability that influenced these filings." A ripple of disapproval moved through the gallery. Victoria kept her eyes forward, calm. She would not give Benjamin the satisfaction of seeing her react. When her attorney stood, the contrast was stark. A calm, steady presence. He wasn't showy. He didn't need theatrics. He only needed truth. "Your Honor, we will present testimony and evidence that Mrs. Thompson has remained clear-minded throughout this ordeal. The instability she has endured did not come from pregnancy." He turned, slightly toward Benjamin, but from the actions of her husband, a murmur spread through the courtroom. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Her attorney turned to her gently. "Victoria, please take the stand." She moved slowly, deliberately, making sure her steps were steady. When she sat, her hands rested naturally on her belly, protective, grounded. The questioning began softly. Background, marriage timeline, changes in Benjamin's behavior, late nights, emotional distance. She answered each with calm honesty. Then came the moment everyone waited for. "Victoria," her attorney asked quietly. "Can you tell the court what happened the night your husband brought Elizabeth to your home?" The courtroom fell silent. Even the sound of typing stopped. Victoria exhaled slowly, gathering strength from somewhere deep. "He came home late," she began. "And she was with him. I saw her standing close to him outside. Too close for him to pretend it meant nothing." A few people in the gallery shifted forward in their seats. "Did your husband deny the relationship?" "No, he never denied it." Her voice didn't tremble, not once. Her attorney paced slowly. "And can you explain what occurred the following day?" "The incident we submitted to the court." Benjamin stiffened. Elizabeth stared at the floor. Victoria held her chin high. "He told me I embarrassed him," she said. "He said I needed to show respect to her." Her voice remained steady. "And then he told me to kneel." A gasp moved through the room like a wave. Victoria continued. "He said that was the only way we could fix things. So I did it, not because I respected her, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to see, with my own eyes, how far he'd fallen." Even the judge's eyes softened for a second. Her attorney nodded. No further questions. Benjamin's attorney approached with a stack of papers, but even he looked uneasy. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, "do you believe your emotional state, heightened by pregnancy, may have influenced how you interpreted your husband's words?" "No," she said immediately. "My pregnancy didn't kneel. I did." Even the court reporter paused briefly, surprised by her clarity. The attorney swallowed. No more questions. Victoria stepped down, breath steady, spine strong. Next came Benjamin. He sat with calm arrogance, hands folded neatly. His attorney prompted gently, "Tell the court your version of events." Benjamin inhaled smoothly, as if preparing to speak at a business panel. "I admit," he said, "mistakes were made. I wasn't as present as I should have been, but I never intended harm. My wife misinterpreted a situation fueled by stress, hormones, and exhaustion. She saw something that wasn't there." A loud whisper broke out. "Is he serious?" Benjamin continued. "Elizabeth is a colleague, nothing more. My intention was to de-escalate the tension between them. The kneeling moment has been exaggerated and taken out of context." Victoria closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. Then, her attorney stood. "I'd like to call Elizabeth to the stand." The gallery shifted with excitement. Elizabeth hesitated before walking up. Her heels clicked loudly, too loudly, in the tense room. When she sat, she clasped her hands tightly in her lap. Her voice shook slightly as she answered the attorney's early questions about her job and how she met Benjamin. But when he asked, "Miss Elizabeth, did Benjamin ever make you feel like he and his wife were separated?" her face paled. "No," she admitted softly. "And did he ever behave toward you in a way that would suggest his marriage was ending?" Another pause. "No." The room reacted. Benjamin stared at her sharply, jaw clenched. "And regarding the kneeling incident, did you witness his wife kneel at his instruction?" Elizabeth looked at Victoria, then at Benjamin, then at the judge. Finally, in a small, trembling voice, she whispered, "Yes." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, shock rolling through the benches like thunder. Benjamin's head snapped toward her, fury flashing in his eyes. But she wasn't done. "And I regret being there," she added. "It was wrong. She didn't deserve that." The courtroom atmosphere shifted instantly, away from Benjamin's crafted narrative, away from his control, away from his influence. This was the twist no one expected. But the biggest one was still coming. "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney said, "we have one more witness." A stir rushed through the gallery. Benjamin's mother stood up. Her face carried a quiet sorrow as she approached the stand. Benjamin inhaled sharply. "Mom, what are you doing?" She didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at Victoria with a tenderness that almost broke her composure. "I'm here to tell the truth," she said softly. The entire courtroom leaned in. The ground under Benjamin's case shook. Victoria felt her heart pound, not in fear this time, but in something close to justice beginning to rise. The judge leaned forward. "Proceed." Benjamin's mother sat on the witness stand with a stillness that made the entire courtroom shift forward in their seats. Her hands clasped each other tightly, knuckles whitening. She took a breath before speaking. "Your Honor," she began softly, "I raised my son to understand responsibility, to understand respect." But somewhere along the way, he lost sight of what those words mean. Benjamin stiffened in his chair. Mom. She didn't look at him. Victoria, she continued gently, turning her eyes toward the woman seated at the plaintiff's table. I want you to know, you were a good wife to him, a kind one, and you deserved better. A murmur spread across the gallery, surprise, approval, disbelief. Benjamin's jaw clenched hard. Why are you doing this? He hissed. She didn't answer him. Instead, she looked directly at the judge. I witnessed the way he spoke about her in recent months. Dismissive, cold, unkind. And when I learned about the kneeling, her voice trembled. No woman should ever be treated with such disrespect, especially a woman carrying your child. Benjamin's face reddened, anger simmering beneath his skin. His mother finished with a quiet strength. I hope this court understands that while he may provide financially, he has failed morally, and Victoria deserves protection from further harm. When she stepped down, the courtroom erupted in whispers. Benjamin buried his face in his hands. His lawyers scrambled, whispering hysterically. The judge took a long moment, reviewing notes, absorbing the emotionally charged atmosphere, letting the weight of the testimony settle like dust in a silent room. Finally, the judge straightened in their seat. Mr. Thompson, they said firmly, please rise. Benjamin stood slowly, anger and panic blending behind his eyes. His confidence had cracked, finally, beneath the collapse of his own behavior made public. Mrs. Thompson, the judge continued, please rise as well. Victoria pushed herself up carefully, one hand on the table, the other resting softly over her belly. Her heartbeat thudded loud and heavy, echoing in her ears. The judge looked between them, expression unreadable. This court acknowledges the emotional trauma endured by Mrs. Thompson during her pregnancy, the judge began. Testimony has shown not only infidelity, but a pattern of manipulation, humiliation, and disregard for the emotional and physical well-being of an expectant mother. Benjamin looked down, furious but trapped. The judge continued, California is a no-fault divorce state, but that does not prevent this court from applying appropriate, corrective measures when one party's conduct crosses the line into emotional harm. The room grew so quiet that even the clicking of pens ceased. Therefore, the judge stated, voice steady and clear, in addition to granting the divorce, effective immediately. This court orders the following punitive and corrective measures against Mr. Benjamin Thompson. Benjamin's head shot up. What? His lawyer tugged at his sleeve urgently, but the judge raised a hand. Silence. Benjamin shut his mouth reluctantly. The judge turned a page. First, Mr. Thompson will provide full financial support for Mrs. Thompson and their child, including comprehensive medical care, living expenses, and additional provisions to ensure the safety and stability of both mother and baby. Benjamin's lawyer stepped forward. Your Honor. Sit down, the judge said without looking up. The lawyer sank back into his chair. The gallery hummed, approval sweeping quietly through the room. The judge continued. Second, Mr. Thompson will complete 90 days of community service at a local women's shelter. This service must be carried out in person, not delegated, not replaced with donations, and will be supervised by shelter coordinators who will submit monthly reports to this court. Benjamin's eyes widened. You can't force me to. The judge struck the gavel lightly. One more outburst, Mr. Thompson, and I will hold you in contempt. Sit down. He sat. The women in the gallery exchanged knowing glances. Poetic, powerful justice. But the judge was not finished. Third, the judge said slowly, voice lowering into something more pointed, Mr. Thompson will issue a formal written apology to Mrs. Thompson, acknowledging the emotional harm caused by his actions. Benjamin scoffed under his breath, but then froze when the judge added, and because the humiliation inflicted upon her was public, the apology must also be delivered publicly. A burst of gasps erupted. Benjamin's face turned a deep shade of disbelief. You expect me to? Yes, the judge cut him off. You forced this woman to kneel before your mistress while she was pregnant with your child. This court will not allow power or wealth to shield you from accountability. The words hung in the room like thunder. Benjamin looked stunned, like the world had shifted under him. Elizabeth covered her mouth, unable to look at anyone. Victoria stood perfectly still, tears gathering, but not from pain this time. The judge lifted one final page, and lastly, they said, as symbolic restitution mirroring the humiliation inflicted upon Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson will kneel. Benjamin's breath caught. Kneel? He repeated, voice cracking with disbelief. In this courtroom, the judge confirmed, as acknowledgement that your actions were degrading and unacceptable. The court does not typically issue symbolic penalties, but your conduct necessitates a corrective gesture you will never forget. The courtroom gasped again, this time louder. Benjamin's lawyer jumped up again. Your Honor, this is... Sit. Down. He sat. Benjamin's face twisted. Anger, humiliation, disbelief all wrestling beneath the surface. Victoria watched him closely. She wasn't hungry for revenge. She wasn't relishing his embarrassment. But she did feel something settle inside her. A sense of closure. A sense of justice. A sense that the world, for once, saw her pain and didn't turn away. The judge looked directly at Benjamin. Kneel, Mr. Thompson. Silence. Benjamin's breath shook. His fists tightened. His pride fought him like a living thing. But slowly, very slowly, he lowered himself to his knees on the courtroom floor. Reporters snapped photos. Gasps echoed. Elizabeth closed her eyes. Victoria exhaled a trembling breath she'd been holding for months. The judge lifted the gavel. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck. The room erupted into shock, whispers, disbelief. But Victoria didn't hear any of it clearly. Her heart was steady, her spine straight, her mind finally free. For the first time since everything shattered, she felt whole again. The gavel's final strike still reverberated in Victoria's chest as she gathered her things from the plaintiff's table. For a moment she simply stood still, letting the moment settle around her like warm air after a storm. Her knees were steady. Her heart was steady. Her breath, finally, was steady. She touched her belly gently. The baby shifted as if sensing the change in her spirit. It's done, she whispered softly. We're free. She turned toward the aisle, and for the first time since entering this courthouse she felt the weight of eyes not as judgment, but as recognition, as respect. When she stepped out of the double doors, the California sunlight poured over her like a blessing, bright, warm, insistent. She blinked into the light, feeling something open inside her chest that had been shut for too long. People began to gather around her almost immediately. A woman from her South LA community approached first, her eyes shining with pride. Baby, you held yourself like a queen in there, she said, squeezing Victoria's hand. Another woman joined in, touching her shoulder gently. You didn't break, she whispered. You showed all of us what strength looks like. Behind them, two younger girls, maybe high school age, maybe from neighborhoods like the ones Victoria taught in, watched her with awe, whispering to each other like they had witnessed something sacred. You okay, Miss Thompson? One asked softly. Victoria smiled for the first time all day, small, tired, but real. I'm getting there, she said. One step at a time. As more people approached, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in months: community, support, a sense of belonging deeper than the pain she had carried. But beneath all the voices, she heard the quiet truth living inside her. She really was a different woman now. The humiliation that once sat heavy in her bones had lifted. The betrayal that once twisted through her chest had loosened. The grief that once made her feel small had been replaced with something stronger: courage. She walked slowly down the courthouse steps, each step deliberate, mindful of her growing belly. The sunlight warmed her face, and for the first time, she didn't feel overshadowed by Benjamin's power or by the fear of raising a child alone. She felt whole. A man called out from the crowd, "We're proud of you, sis." Another woman said, "You gave a voice to every mother who's ever been silenced." Even strangers nodded at her with quiet respect. Her throat tightened, not from sadness, but from a deep, grounding gratitude. This moment belonged to her, not to the pain that had led here, not to the man who tried to break her, not to the courtroom spectators who dissected her life. It belonged to Victoria, a black woman who endured betrayal, humiliation, emotional cruelty, and still walked out into the sunlight. She paused halfway down the steps, placing a hand over her belly once more. "Little one," she whispered, "your mother is stronger than she's ever been. And you are coming into a world where dignity matters, where your mother refuses to kneel for anyone but God." The baby nudged gently as if agreeing. She exhaled slowly, letting the California breeze wash through her curls, lifting the strain from her shoulders. She thought of her grandmother's words. "When life breaks you, baby, don't spend time sweeping up the pieces. Walk out with what's still whole." And here she was, still whole, still standing, still rising. At the bottom of the steps, members of her community formed a loose circle around her, like a shield, like family. A woman hugged her gently, careful of her belly. "You survived something meant to crush your spirit," she whispered. "But you walked out here shining." Victoria nodded. "I didn't survive alone." She wasn't referring only to the people around her. She meant the child she carried, the life inside her that kept her steady on nights she could have fallen apart. She turned back toward the courthouse one last time. The building looked different now, not like a place of fear or judgment, but a place where she reclaimed her dignity. And Benjamin? Somewhere inside, he was still dealing with the consequences of his actions, the kneeling, the public shame, the reality of justice landing on his shoulders. But she didn't need to see him to know one thing. She would never be the same woman who walked into that courtroom. She was stronger, clearer, more grounded, reborn in her own truth. With one last inhale of warm California air, she stepped forward into the next chapter of her life. The courthouse emptied slowly, but Benjamin didn't move. He remained kneeling long after the judge exited, long after the murmurs faded, long after the last camera click echoed through the chamber. His lawyers hovered behind him, whispering instructions, urging him to stand, insisting they could manage the fallout, but he didn't seem to hear. His reality had collapsed. Minutes earlier, he stood as a billionaire, powerful, untouchable, used to bending the world to his will. Now he was on his knees in a courtroom, surrounded by strangers who watched him with a mix of shock, judgment, and, worst of all, recognition. He had done this. Not the judge, not Victoria, not the media. He had created the humiliation he now drowned in. When he finally rose, his legs shook slightly, and his mother refused to meet his eyes. She walked out of the courtroom before he could speak to her. That alone cracked something inside him that wealth had never prepared him for. The hallway outside buzzed with commotion. Reporters swarmed, microphones raised, questions flying. "Mr. Thompson, do you regret your actions? Why force your wife to kneel? Will you comply with the community service order? Do you plan to appeal?" Benjamin lifted a hand to shield his face, but the cameras had already captured everything they needed. The internet would devour him within hours. His public image, the carefully polished persona, the tech visionary, the respected entrepreneur, was no longer a symbol of success. It was a cautionary tale. His attorney pulled him forward. "We need to move. We need an official statement ready in the next 12 hours, and do not react to the press." Benjamin didn't speak. He couldn't. As they reached the courthouse doors, Elizabeth trailed behind him, her eyes clouded with panic, guilt, and something like regret she didn't know how to voice. Outside, once the cameras thinned, she stepped closer. "Ben," she said carefully, This is bad." He didn't look at her. "You think I don't know that?" "I didn't expect," she hesitated. "I didn't think it would go this far." He turned sharply. "You didn't think? You were right there when she knelt. You didn't stop me." Elizabeth flinched. "You told me not to interfere. You said you had it under control." A bitter laugh escaped him, short, humorless. Control, the thing he valued above everything else, the thing he had lost the moment the judge demanded he kneel in return. Elizabeth wrapped her arms around herself, stepping back. "Ben, maybe we should take some space, just for now." He stared at her. "You're leaving?" "Not forever," she said weakly. This shame isn't mine to carry. It belongs to you." Her words stung deeper than he expected. She didn't wait for him to respond. She walked away down the courthouse steps, quickly, as if afraid the cameras would scoop her back up into his scandal. Benjamin watched her go. He didn't call after her. For the first time, he understood what it meant to stand alone, not by circumstance, but by consequence. Later that evening, his company's board held an emergency meeting. Video screens glowed coldly as executives joined from across the country. One board member spoke first. "Benjamin, your behavior reflects poorly on the company." Another chimed in. "The photos are everywhere. The comments are brutal. Shareholders are concerned." A third added sharply, "And you're under a court order to complete community service. This is unprecedented for a CEO of your stature." Benjamin swallowed hard, but maintained composure. "I can manage the backlash." "No," the chairwoman said firmly. "You will take a temporary leave while we stabilize public perception." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decision. A man who once commanded rooms with ease now stood silent as his authority eroded, piece by piece. When the meeting ended, Benjamin remained seated in his dark office, staring out at the California skyline. He saw his reflection in the window, not the confident man the world once chased for interviews and deals, but a man staring at the ruins of his own choices. He whispered into the empty room, "What have I done?" No one answered. Meanwhile, Elizabeth sat alone in her apartment that night. Her phone buzzed endlessly, messages from friends, co-workers, even strangers, who recognized her from the photos. How could you be part of that? Did you really let his wife kneel? Girl, run. She turned her phone face down and stared at her reflection in the glass door leading to her balcony. She didn't like what she saw. She remembered Victoria's eyes in the courtroom, steady, strong, unbroken. Elizabeth had the sinking realization that she had never possessed that kind of strength. She'd aligned herself with Benjamin because he made her feel chosen, important, desired. But now, she felt small, and she felt ashamed. She whispered into the room, "I was wrong." It was the first true moment of accountability she'd allowed herself. She sank onto the couch, hugging her knees, finally understanding something. Benjamin destroyed his marriage long before the courtroom sentence. And she, whether she meant to or not, helped him do it. There would be no reconciliation with him, no glamorous future, no hidden romance reborn once the scandal blew over. There was only distance now. Heavy, deserved distance. Victoria, meanwhile, didn't think about them at all. Their consequences were not her concern. Their fallout was not her burden. Their regrets were not her responsibility. She had walked out of the courthouse with sunlight on her face, strength in her stride, community at her side. Benjamin faced shame. Elizabeth faced clarity. Victoria faced freedom. And that difference was everything. The next morning, California woke up slow and golden, the kind of morning where the sky looked freshly washed and the world felt just a little softer. Victoria stood at her bedroom window, watching sunlight stretch across the neighborhood rooftops. The air smelled faintly of jasmine drifting in through the screen. Someone nearby must have watered their garden early. She rested her hand on her belly again, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her breath beneath her palm. Her child responded with a soft nudge as if greeting her. "We made it," she whispered. "We really made it, not just through the court case, not just through the betrayal, but through the quiet, personal war inside her, the one she fought every night when she questioned her worth, when she wondered why love turned painful, when she feared raising this baby alone. She wasn't afraid anymore." She walked into the living room, where a vase of flowers, sent by community members, neighbors, and even a few strangers from online support groups, sat on the table. Cards leaned against the base of the vase. "Stay strong, sis. You represent so many of us. You deserve justice." Her throat tightened with gratitude. Black women across California had been reaching out to her in messages, sharing their own stories, their own near breaks, their own moments of reclaiming dignity. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. She eased herself onto the couch and leaned back, letting her body relax into the cushions. The baby moved again. Slow, steady, calm. "I know," she whispered with a soft smile. "You're ready too." Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Proud of you, baby. Making oxtails tonight. Come over if you feel up to it." Victoria chuckled. Leave it to her mother to offer healing through food and familiarity. She typed back a simple, "I'll be there." She wasn't going to rush into anything today. She wasn't going to fill her time with tasks or decisions. For the first time in months, she allowed herself stillness without guilt. Yet even in stillness, reflection came. She thought of the girl she was when she first met Benjamin, bright-eyed, hopeful, believing in love the way her grandmother believed in prayer. She thought of the woman she had become, shaped by betrayal, reshaped by resilience. Two versions of her life stood side by side. The woman who loved a man who could not love her back in the same way, and the woman who chose herself, even when choosing herself hurt. She inhaled deeply, letting pride settle in her chest. Later that afternoon, she walked slowly down her sidewalk, taking in the warm California air. Neighbors she hadn't spoken to in weeks waved at her, offering hugs, gentle smiles, respect. Word traveled fast in her community. People knew what she had survived. They treated her like someone who had crossed a storm and returned with lessons worth listening to. One older man sitting on his porch nodded at her with quiet admiration. "You walked out of that courthouse with your crown on, young lady," he said. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from being seen. "Thank you," she replied softly. She continued her walk, letting the rhythm steady her breathing. For the first time, the world around her felt safe again. Cars passed with music spilling out of open windows. Kids biked down the sidewalk, laughing, racing. Dogs barked in fenced yards. A couple walked hand in hand, talking softly. Life moved forward around her as if encouraging her to do the same. When she returned home, she stepped into the nursery, the room she hadn't dared to enter during the worst moments with Benjamin. The walls were a soft shade of sunflower gold. A crib her brother had helped assemble sat against the far wall. A mobile spun gently above it, tiny clouds and stars turning in slow circles. She walked to the crib and rested her hand on the railing. "You're going to have peace here," she whispered to her child. "You're going to grow up loved, not controlled. You're going to know your mother fought for your safety before you even arrived." Her eyes softened as she imagined holding them for the first time. She imagined introducing them to her mother's cooking, her community's warmth, black joy, black resilience, loud barbecues, quiet church mornings, Juneteenth celebrations glowing with culture and pride. She imagined telling them stories, ones filled with hope, not heartbreak. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't wipe it away. It wasn't sorrow, it was release. She took a deep breath, feeling strength anchored deeper in her chest. Then, with a warm, reflective tone, she turned her thoughts to the people watching her story unfold on screen. "My friends," she would say to her viewers, "dignity is not something you negotiate, it's something you protect. Even when it hurts, even when you're afraid, even when the person breaking your heart is someone you once prayed for." She imagined looking directly at the audience, speaking from a place of truth richer than anything she'd ever known. If you're going through something heavy, if someone has made you believe, you have to shrink yourself to keep the peace. Please hear me. You deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve joy. You deserve to walk toward the sunlight like I did. She rested her hand over her belly again, the baby shifting as though encouraging her. "This isn't the end of my story," she said softly. "It's the beginning of a better one." She turned toward the window, where sunlight spilled into the nursery like a quiet promise. "And if this story touched you," she would add gently, "share it with someone who needs hope. Someone who needs courage. Someone who needs to remember they are worth more than the pain they've endured." Victoria smiled, warm, steady, sure. Her new beginning had already started. And this time, she was choosing it for herself.